Hey guys, welcome back to the 0 to 3500 challenge. My name's Zyphine, and here we are with our new warrior. He's made it to level 90, and now it's time to start gearing him up and getting to a position where we can take on some Mythic Plus dungeons. I started off by doing some of these world quests that started appearing, the Void Assaults that came with the latest patch. They seem pretty easy enough to do when you're not doing them on war mode and getting hit by hordes, but they seem to give a fair bit of gear. I also started doing Nightmare Prey, and this was something that I started to make look incredibly difficult, even though I had done it several times before. Doing it on an undergeared warrior, where I did not know the class very well, was actually fairly challenging. If I wasn't paying complete attention and actually doing mechanics, interrupts, and dodging their abilities, it actually ended up being so challenging that I actually died to this boss a couple of times, until I learnt to use my heroic leap properly to get out of the way of his beams, and my charge to get back in and not get dragged into these holes in the ground. But after a while of making sure that this boss started to look a little bit more difficult than Mythic Allura, we did eventually kill it and start getting some actual gear pieces. And once we started getting the gear pieces, these Nightmare Preys did start getting a bit easier. I do think that maybe this one enemy is just a lot stronger than some of the other Nightmare Prey, because the others didn't give me nearly as much trouble as this one did in particular. So after doing a couple of the Nightmare Preys, I started experimenting with different ways to get gear. I noticed that the Void Assaults seemed to give like a bag that would give some gear in it, so I thought, oh, we'll give it a go and we'll see how we can do it. You start off by having to do this sort of, I guess, a scenario where you have to build armor and take out enemies, and these seem to occur once you get the bar to 100% on the main quest in the area. I believe they fluctuate between being in Eversong Woods or being in New Zalaman Zone. So you have to see which one's in what area between the Void Rituals and these big Void Assault quests. They're not exactly too challenging as long as you've got enough people in the area. They also don't seem to take too long. Yeah, you do get to practice a little bit of marksmanship, as I found a little crossbow at the back of the room that I was able to fire into the boss to help bring the shield down. That way I didn't have to get killed by the boss's subtle AoEs, and I could still contribute pretty well to actually killing the boss with my friends. Something else we decided to do while flying around doing world quests to get starter gear was kill the rares. The rares can drop adventurer level gear, and it is warbound, so if you don't use it on one character, you can always put it in your war bank when you get another character up to the max level. It's a nice little starting point, although the gear is not as good and there is a lot better stuff available now very quickly. It will still at least get you out of those questing greens and blues and into something that actually lets you deal a little bit of actual damage. Something else we can do now that we're level 90 is go and pick up our bonus rolls. Fortunately, I'd already unlocked all these on my main. You can do so by doing 6 times a quest where you have to pick up 3 little shards, and then 4 times a quest where you need to pick up some other shards. And that will unlock your ability to do bonus rolls and your ability to get ascended void shards. These, when you have 5 of them, can be upgraded into an item that allows you to upgrade a weapon or full heroic / mythic trinkets into a 298 or a 285 level item. I also quickly went around and picked up all the champion gear you get for getting your reputations up to level 10. Luckily again, I had already done this on my main, and it was a quick enough thing for me to just go around and collect them. And this allowed me to quickly finish off the last Nightmare Prey I needed to do to get the shard that will summon the delve boss within a delve to get me a hero piece of gear. Now that we picked up that item, we headed over to a delve, did it on level 8. When you get to the halfway point, we used the item to summon the delve boss, defeated him and got a delver's bounty, which we then used and finished off the rest of the delve to try and get ourselves a hero item. Unfortunately, something I had begun to notice was how unlucky I was getting with gear. I was either getting the same pieces over and over again, or just getting pieces with awful stats in general that I couldn't really even use anyway because my lower item stats, such as my rings and necklaces, actually had the correct stats for my class on them, so they ended up being better regardless. So anyway, we blasted through a couple more delves to try and get a nice baseline of gear so that we could come into Mythic Pluses and actually become more useful to our group. It was also the weekly delve quest anyway, so I did that to try and get my item cache, which would then hopefully give me a good piece of gear. Unfortunately, it was the wrong trinket from the Dream Rift, but we still thought we could use it for now until we replace it with something a bit stronger. I also decided to just spend my catalyst charges to unlock the ability to farm them. It also would give me my forcep, which would hopefully get me a bit stronger. And then we finally did it and started queuing up for some low level Mythic Plus to try and get the journey begun. And lo and behold, we did it. Our first Mythic Plus dungeon on this character was to be Mythic Caverns. And this is a dungeon that I haven't actually done a lot on any of my mains. It seems to be, although not for any reason, one that I am avoiding like the plague this season. I feel that the dungeon itself is quite enjoyable and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of important casts, the bosses are quite fun, but it's just not a dungeon that's either had gear that I need to target, or it's just one that I'm not that interested in doing all the time. I much prefer to do Algafard Academy or Pit of Sauron or Nexus Point, because I just find those dungeons a little bit more enjoyable at this early stage of the expansion. But anyway, in Mythic Caverns at the start, you need to go around and free 8 of these trolls, and that will unlock the first boss for you. There are various different paths you can do to get these trolls. I've seen some tanks go to the left, I've seen some tanks go to the right, and I've seen a couple more even more unorthodox paths from some tanks. But as long as you get the 8 trolls, and you get an efficient amount of enemies that you can avoid some more later in the dungeon, it doesn't really seem to matter. Eventually we come to the first boss. Now this is a boss I think could be really good for the Arms Warrior. The fact that there are 2 bosses for the entirety of the fight means that Sweeping Strike is getting a lot of value here. So this might actually be a dungeon where I could be a higher priority pick than some other classes, just because of my 2 target priority. I didn't see any real warrior kind of tips and tricks yet on this fight, so feel free to let me know in the comments if there are some interesting things you can do with warrior here on this fight to avoid mechanics or to sort of get the edge on the other classes. I was using Heroic Leap to get into the traps at the last second if the bird was to focus me, and I felt like that was a good use of Heroic Leap, but maybe you guys know something more than I do. We then move on into this next room over here where there's quite a few like annoying casters and annoying enemies. We just sort of group them all up. I know that some groups like to use heroism on this room, and it's not a bad idea because there is a lot of enemies here, especially if you're in a faster group where you don't need heroism on the boss. I just feel like this room is one of the better places to do it, and a lot of tanks I've played with try and pull a lot of stuff here so that they don't have to pull as much later. I believe the tank in this dungeon that I was doing was deciding to opt to pull more enemies later in the dungeon. So it was a new experience for me. In the few times I've done my Mythic Caverns, I've never really done it where we're putting more later. It's usually more early and then skipping as many packs as possible coming into the last couple bosses. Now we come to the second boss. In this boss you have to guide the ghosts she spawns into each other to make them explode. I found that as a warrior there wasn't really any ways I could force them to move into each other. I could always sort of stun one and wait for the other one to come across, which wasn't a terrible idea I found, but it's not like on my evoker or my shaman where I could just blast them into each other and make life a lot easier. A fairly simple boss though, and not much to talk about here from a warrior perspective, but if there's something I don't know about this boss that you can do on warrior, again, make sure to let me know in the comments. Finally we come to the bridge, and this is where I know that a lot of people were starting to skip mobs, because you can use things like Ring of Peace and shackles, things like that to get around the enemies and not have to deal with them, and it means you only have to take a couple of the mobs on the bridge, because they despawn when you pull the boss anyway. I think here we actually realised we have missed some counts, so we have to go back and kill the enemies. Again, another thing where I said that maybe clearing more enemies in that middle room would have made this a bit smoother, but this is the risk you take when you do lower keys. Sometimes you get tanks that don't know the routes, so you just have to improvise and just let them know, push them in the right direction if they may be missing count. Do it in a polite way, obviously. You don't need to call them out on missing. Tanks do have a lot of responsibility when it comes to Mythic Plus, especially routing, so I like to be as helpful as possible and just try and guide them in a direction where I know a route that maybe they don't. Again, this boss also relies a little bit on your tanks, because if they are standing in the wrong place, you end up with that sludge right in the middle of the room. And also, I think that people get totem and need to try and move close together. This would be another area where sweeping strikes and AoE could be really useful, and it would be a lot easier if the people who got the totems would stand close together. You can see we're struggling a little bit with this fight because the totems are being pushed all over the place and the tank is popping the crap on the floor in some weird places, but it's still easily doable on this sort of level, but on higher keys you would have to be a lot more aware of that. During this section of the fight where you have to run across the bridge, Warriors has surprisingly a lot of ways to actually interrupt the ghost and make sure we can move on. Just don't do what I'm doing and run through every single ghost on the way over to the boss and get yourself rooted constantly. You can use your Stormbolt, you can use your Shockwave, you can use your actual interrupt. Warrior have like no end of ways to get past those ghosts and make sure we get the full buff. But there you go. I'm sorry that this video has taken a little while to come out. I've had a lot going on in my actual life right now, and I kind of lost motivation to do these videos. I'm going to get back into it, and I've got a banger episode for you coming up where you're going to meet a beautiful tank called Kirigaya who tanked one of my dungeons. Thank you so much for watching these videos. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you can follow along on this journey. I will hopefully make some more actual Elemental Shaman guides, and give me suggestions for helpful videos that you guys might want to see, and I'm always happy to help. You can also watch me over at twitch.tv @Zyf_Mike, where I've been playing a little bit more of a variation of games, but feel free to come in and talk about World of Warcraft as well if you wish. So thank you very much, and I promise next episode we'll be back to normal form. Thank you very much.